Titanic's ending. James Cameron originally shot an entirely different ending for Titanic, where elderly Rose wasn't alone on the research vessel's stern. The original ending, filmed but cut before theatrical release in December 1997, featured Rose on the Keldysh research vessel with her granddaughter Elizabeth and deep-sea explorer Brock Lovett. Rose reveals she has possessed the Heart of the Ocean necklace the entire time during the film. Brock pleads with her not to throw it overboard, wanting to hold the diamond briefly. Rose delivers a speech telling Brock that the real treasure is life itself and making each day count. Crew members gather in shock, with one exclaiming that it really sucks at the revelation. The alternate ending felt preachy, manipulative, and tonally incongruous with the 2-hour build-up. Cameron decided the quiet, personal moment of Rose alone on the stern was far more cinematically powerful. This alternate ending demonstrates how adding more characters and explicit messaging can actually diminish emotional impact. The original version's power came from subtlety and intimacy, transforming what could have been a schmaltzy moment into one of cinema's most poignant conclusions. Cameron's choice to trust his audience's intelligence proved crucial to Titanic's legacy as a cultural phenomenon. Empire's Hope. The Empire Strikes Back almost ended with Luke Skywalker in complete despair, with no hint of hope or future victories. The original ending script had Luke escape from Darth Vader, but with no final visual hope. Mark Hamill confirmed that the original script simply ended after the Vader confrontation. George Lucas realized at early screenings the ending wasn't going to fly, due to confusion, not darkness. The original ending created a confusing cut from the Millennium Falcon cockpit directly to Medical Bay, with no visual context showing they were on different ships. Lucas added the final scene of Luke and Leia looking out into space from the Medical Bay window in post-production. Industrial Light and Magic visual effects supervisor, Tom Smith, had to create shots clarifying the spatial geography, stating it was a real challenge that George had tossed them. The theatrical version ending established the pattern of hope that would define all 3 original trilogy films. This change illustrates how a film's ending can be fundamentally altered, not for narrative reasons, but for technical clarity, proving that sometimes the best creative decisions come from solving logistical problems. The ILM challenge detail adds production lore appeal to the story of how a practical necessity became an iconic moment. Terminator 2 Future. Terminator 2 was originally supposed to end in a peaceful future, where Sarah Connor, now 64 years old, watches her adult son John playing with his daughter in a Washington, D.C. park. The alternate future coda, or Elysian Park ending, was fully filmed and completed, taking place in July 2029, depicting a world where Judgment Day never happened due to the Connors' actions. Linda Hamilton underwent makeup application to age her character to 64 years old. Michael Edwards returned as adult John Connor, who now has his own daughter. The scene shows civilians casually enjoying the park, with cycling, reading, and children playing without concern of nuclear annihilation. Sarah delivers voiceover narration stating that August 29, 1997 came and went with nothing much happening, and there was no Judgment Day. John Connor is depicted as a U.S. Senator, fighting wars with common sense and hope rather than weapons. The final shot shows Sarah smiling as her granddaughter asks her to tie her shoelace, the only time we see Sarah smile in the entire film. Director James Cameron ultimately removed this ending 2 days before theatrical release. Cameron's decision to cut this ending, despite its completion and emotional resonance, reveals his sophisticated understanding of tone and theme. The definitive happy ending contradicted the film's philosophical core about fate and the ambiguity of the future. By maintaining narrative uncertainty, Cameron preserved the trilogy's themes about whether the future can truly be changed. This choice influenced how subsequent blockbuster sequels handled their conclusions. Alien's death. Ridley Scott originally envisioned Ellen Ripley being killed at the end of Alien, with the xenomorph recording a final log message in her voice before heading toward Earth. In early conceptual stages, Scott planned for the alien to kill Ripley inside the escape shuttle. The creature would be harpooned, but the strike would be ineffective. The alien would then slam through Ripley's helmet and decapitate her, similar to how it kills Ash. The xenomorph would then mimic Ripley's voice and record the final log to Earth, stating she'll be home in 6 weeks. This concept was entirely scrapped in favor of Ripley's triumphant escape and self-rescue. Scott has an obsession with human decapitation, as it happened to Ash, nearly happened to Ripley, and eventually affected David in Prometheus. The theatrical ending established Ripley as one of cinema's greatest heroines, instead of a cautionary victim. Scott's abandoned concept would have fundamentally altered cinema history by denying audiences a strong female protagonist capable of survival and agency. The theatrical ending's success created the template for action heroines that would define decades of filmmaking. Brazil's Battle. Terry Gilliam's dystopian masterpiece Brazil exists in 3 completely different versions, including a studio-imposed happy ending that Gilliam actively fought against in court. Gilliam's original vision was a 142-minute cut with a tragic ending where Sam Lowry's mind is lobotomized while he escapes in his dreams. Universal Pictures demanded a shorter runtime and a happy ending, creating the Love Conquers All cut at 94 minutes. The Love Conquers All version features Sam rescued by his dream woman, fleeing to an idyllic countryside cabin with the dream becoming reality. The theatrical compromise was a 132-minute cut that Gilliam negotiated, maintaining his original dark ending but cutting 10 minutes of material. Gilliam took extraordinary action to fight the studio, publicly campaigning and appearing on American television with Robert De Niro. Universal executive Sid Sheinberg actively suppressed the film's release, refusing to distribute Gilliam's preferred version. Gilliam took out advertisements in Variety, asking when Sheinberg would release his film, confronting the executive publicly. The studio's Love Conquers All cut was never officially released theatrically in America, existing only as a version for home video markets. Brazil represents one of Hollywood's most infamous director-studio battles, with Gilliam's refusal to compromise ultimately vindicating his artistic vision. It influenced how studios would subsequently approach auteur-driven science fiction films. Seven's darkness. Seven's nihilistic ending, where Mills executes John Doe, was so dark that the studio demanded writer Andrew Kevin Walker produce 13 alternative drafts, some attempting to save Tracy's life entirely. Andrew Kevin Walker completed the original script with Tracy dead in the box. New Line Cinema considered the ending too grim for mainstream release and requested rewrites. Walker wrote 13 separate ending drafts based on studio notes and concerns. One major alternate had Mills surviving with John Doe killed by Somerset instead, ending with Somerset recovering and reading an apologetic letter from fugitive Mills. Another variation had Tracy surviving the box scenario entirely, with a shootout allowing detectives to rescue her and win the day. Executives suggested replacing Tracy's head with that of Mills' pet dog or an unidentified woman. David Fincher received the original script by accident, instead of a studio-approved rewrite, read it, and refused to film anything else. Brad Pitt contractually stipulated that the original ending must remain or he wouldn't star in the film. Fincher and Pitt's refusal to compromise ultimately convinced the studio to trust the vision. The fact that the studio had 13 alternatives written suggests how desperate they were to soften the conclusion. Yet Fincher's refusal to film any alternate version created one of cinema's most devastating final acts, proving that studio interference often leads to diluted storytelling. The film's lasting impact directly correlates to its refusal to provide catharsis. Cloverfield's Protocol. The theatrical ending of Cloverfield shows the monster destroying New York, but director Matt Reeves' vision emphasized an ending where the monster and main characters all die in a military bombing operation. The final theatrical cut shows all 6 main characters dead by film's end, with Rob and Beth killed by military saturation bombing. The Hammerdown Protocol bombing was always intended to destroy Manhattan and kill the monster. Reeves confirmed the ending remained consistent with the monster dying, but so does everyone else. Studio debates occurred about whether to show the protagonist surviving the bombing. The final shot cuts to pre-monster footage of Rob and Beth on Coney Island as something alien falls into the water in the background. This ending proved controversial because found footage horror typically ends with at least some survivor perspective. Cloverfield's willingness to kill all protagonists was radical for 2008 blockbuster cinema, defying the expectation that found footage survivors would present the footage themselves. This artistic choice elevated the film from creature feature to commentary on human insignificance in the face of indifferent natural or alien forces. Shining's Hospital. Stanley Kubrick filmed an alternate ending to The Shining, showing Wendy and Danny recovering in a hospital, where hotel manager Stuart Ullman mysteriously appears, suggesting his connection to the hotel's evil. Kubrick shot a full hospital scene after the chaos at the hotel, depicting Wendy and Danny recovering, with Danny receiving treatment from a doctor. Stuart Ullman appears, revealing he possesses the yellow ball that previously guided Danny to room 237. Ullman's appearance and knowledge of the ball strongly implied he was aware of, or complicit in, the hotel's sinister nature. The scene included explanatory dialogue that would have clarified ambiguous plot points. Kubrick ordered all unused footage destroyed per his contract with Warner Brothers. The European release version was 25 minutes shorter than the American version, with additional cuts throughout. The director felt the hospital ending and other scenes disrupted the film's ambiguity and pacing. Shelley Duvall disagreed with the cut, calling it Hitchcockian and feeling it clarified important narrative elements. Kubrick's deliberate destruction of the hospital footage demonstrates his extreme commitment to maintaining ambiguity, show the director's philosophy that certain information, once captured, could contaminate the final artwork. This decision directly influenced how modern horror cinema embraces unexplained mysteries. By the way, if you're enjoying this deep dive into alternate endings, I post videos like this regularly. Subscribing would really help out. Future's blast. Back to the Future was originally supposed to end with Marty McFly driving directly into a nuclear bomb test explosion, emerging from the mushroom cloud back in 1985. The original script featured a military nuclear bomb test as the power source for the DeLorean's time travel. Storyboards discovered in 2016 showed Doc Brown timing the test so Marty would drive through the detonation. The explosion would obliterate a fake town built on the test site, with Marty miraculously surviving the nuclear blast. People would gather around the test site on tours, only to witness the DeLorean reappearing. The sequence was the most expensive set piece planned for the film. A constructed fake town had to be built. The studio pressured producers Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale to cut $1 million from the budget. The nuclear ending was eliminated by filming on the backlot instead, creating the lightning strike ending. Back to the Future's nuclear ending would have been tonally inconsistent with the film's adventurous, optimistic spirit. The lightning strike is actually a superior ending that's elegant, magical, and thematically appropriate. This case demonstrates that budget limitations force creative decisions that ultimately improve the final product. Apocalypse versions. Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now exists in 3 officially released versions, with fundamentally different pacing, and the director himself has gone back and forth on which is the correct version. The theatrical version, released in 1979 at 153 minutes, was considered the definitive cut for decades. Apocalypse Now Redux, released in 2001, with 49 additional minutes of material, runs 202 minutes total. Redux reintroduces a French plantation sequence lasting 35+ minutes that Coppola had originally cut. The plantation sequence is surreal, but disrupts pacing and diminishes Kurtz's enigmatic presence. Apocalypse Now Final Cut, released in 2019, after Coppola reviewed criticism of Redux, runs 182 minutes, representing Coppola's attempt to find middle ground between theatrical and Redux. Critics generally regard Redux as the weakest version, with the theatrical cut remaining the strongest. Apocalypse Now's 3 versions represent a director's evolving relationship with his own work, demonstrating that the same story can be fundamentally altered by editing choices. Blade Runner versions. Blade Runner exists in multiple versions with different endings regarding whether Deckard is a replicant, each presenting entirely different thematic meanings. The theatrical cut from 1982 featured an uplifting ending with Deckard and Rachel driving into the future. The director's cut from 1992 removed voiceover narration and added the ambiguous unicorn imagery. The final cut from 2007 represented Ridley Scott's definitive vision with specific Deckard as replicant implications. Philip K. Dick's source novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, had a fundamentally different, ambiguous ending about mercerism. The film diverged dramatically from the book to provide hope rather than existential bleakness. Multiple alternate endings were storyboarded but never filmed for different versions. Blade Runner demonstrates how the same footage can be presented with different framings to tell opposite stories, with the multiple versions representing recontextualizations of identical narrative events rather than separate endings. Inception's top. Christopher Nolan intentionally refused to clarify whether Cobb returns to reality or remains in a dream, with the spinning top deliberately left ambiguous despite persistent audience theories. The ending shows Cobb spinning the top before walking away to his children without watching if it falls. The top visibly wavers before cutting to black, suggesting potential instability. Michael Caine appears in the final scene, which Nolan stated implies reality. The children's clothing shows slight variations between memory scenes and the final scene, with different outfits. Cobb isn't wearing his wedding ring in the airport, suggesting reality, as he wears it in dreams. Christopher Nolan has stated the ending's ambiguity is intentional, but emotional, not intellectual. Nolan clarified that the importance isn't whether it's real, but that Cobb stops caring and chooses his children. Inception's ending represents intentional ambiguity as artistic choice, rather than unresolved plot hole, with Nolan's refusal to provide definitive answers actually reinforcing the film's themes about the subjective nature of reality and the power of ideas. This approach influenced subsequent blockbusters to embrace mystery. Fight Club censorship. When Fight Club was released in China, the entire ending was replaced with a text card explaining that the bombs were prevented and the narrator was institutionalized for treatment. The original ending shows Narrator and Marlowe watching buildings explode from anarchist Project Mayhem. The Chinese version omits the explosion sequence entirely, replaced with a text card stating that the police swiftly uncovered the entire plan and arrested all criminals, successfully averting the explosion. Additional text reveals that after trial, the narrator was sent to a mental institution for psychological treatment and was discharged in 2012. Chuck Palahniuk noted the Chinese version actually aligns more closely with the novel's ending than Fincher's film. The book ends with the narrator institutionalized, and hospital staff revealing themselves as Project Mayhem members. 12+ minutes of footage were restored for recent streaming releases, including scenes originally cut. Fight Club's Chinese censorship represents how regional considerations can sometimes accidentally align a film more closely with its source material. The irony that totalitarian censorship forced the film toward literary authenticity demonstrates how alternate endings aren't always the result of artistic deliberation, but sometimes imposed by external forces. Rings Extended. Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy had dramatically different endings across theatrical and extended edition releases, with major character resolutions completely reordered or omitted from cinemas. Return of the King Extended Edition added 51 minutes of content, including Saruman's death scene and multiple character resolutions. The theatrical cut completely omits Saruman's storyline conclusion entirely, leaving his fate unresolved. The extended edition features the Mouth of Sauron sequence lasting 3 minutes 15 seconds, where Aragorn defeats a messenger, not in the theatrical cut. Éowyn's discovery of her injured brother on the battlefield, lasting 2 minutes 22 seconds, appears only in the extended edition. Various romantic resolutions for Éowyn and Faramir are expanded significantly in extended versions. Fellowship Extended Edition added 30 minutes, while The Two Towers added 44 minutes of content. Lord of the Rings Extended Editions demonstrate how theatrical constraints demand different storytelling choices than home video releases. The theatrical cuts are masterworks of pacing, while extended editions provide deeper character satisfaction, showing that complete storytelling sometimes requires different mediums. If you found this valuable, subscribe so you never miss new content. Thanks for watching.